What's growing on, gardeners? It's Tuesday, September 19th, and summer is coming to an end here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. That's why on today's video, I'm going to share with you all my 5 favorite types of mulch and why you must use them as soon as possible in order to winterize your garden and your yard before the cold comes. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the bell to receive new video notifications, and check out our Amazon store and Spreadshop links in the video description for everything I use in my garden and awesome custom designed apparel and other gear. Your support is greatly appreciated. I'm going to begin this video by sharing my 5 favorite types of mulch and why I think those types are the most beneficial. Then, at the end of the video, I'm going to explain why it is so important that you mulch your garden and your fruit trees and your other landscaping in the fall, because the reason why we mulch in the fall is different than why we mulch in the spring. My first favorite type of mulch is old wheat straw. Whoa. Why old wheat straw and not new wheat straw? Wheat straw is a byproduct of growing wheat. What farmers do is they harvest the tops of the wheat that contains the seeds, and then that is what is ground up into flour. And then the bases of the plants are baled up and sold as wheat straw. So the reason why I don't like using brand new wheat straw is because there is going to be some amount of seed left over, and that seed is going to germinate. You can see all the wheatgrass that is germinating in these brand new straw bales. And while it's not a lot of germination, it could be enough to be annoying. Surprisingly, the fronts of the straw bales have minimal germination, probably because the sun is so strong here that it killed a lot of the wheat straw seed. But if you look in the back that faces north, you will see where it's in perpetual shade, a lot of germination. So if you're in a particularly shady area, it's possible that your brand new straw bales could sprout quite a bit of wheatgrass. For that reason, I prefer to wait to use my wheat straw until the seeds have rotted and no longer germinate. Now, if you've been a follower of my channel for a while, you know that I use wheat straw predominantly for 2 things. The first thing is to grow tomatoes in, which I had incredible success with this year, and what I just showed you on my previous shot. The other thing that I do with my wheat straw is I use them to insulate the pseudostems of my bananas over the winter, because bananas cannot tolerate frost or freeze, which we get a lot of here in North Carolina, and it does a pretty good job at keeping them alive. What you see right here is the remnants of my straw bale tomato garden that I started back in March to grow my tomatoes in. The tomatoes are all dead. They were destroyed in a hurricane, but I still have that beautiful leftover straw that has started to decay, and this stuff is like gold. It is going to be like putting gold and diamonds down on my soil. Money can't buy how good this stuff is right now. And because this straw is so old, all of the seeds in it have long since rotted. So this stuff is going to give me incredible amounts of nutrients to my soil, and I'm not going to have any weed seed germination. I use the old wheat straw specifically around my fruit trees because it breaks down pretty slowly, and because of the way it interlocks, it gets some of the best coverage in terms of blocking weed seed germination. I have never found a wood-based mulch that works as well as straw mulch for blocking weeds. All of this straw mulch is an entire year old. I used it last year to insulate all of my banana plants, and then I simply pulled it out and I repurposed it around my landscaping, and it is still in fantastic shape. Everywhere you look, I have straw still in place with very minimal weed germination. Now remember, we're talking about wheat straw here, not hay. Straw and hay are not the same things. Hay has a high rate of contamination by persistent herbicides like Grazon, because if the hay comes from a ranch where you have grazing cattle, the ranchers tend to spray wide areas of the field with persistent herbicides to stop weeds from growing so the cows can eat the grass. Wheat straw, on the other hand, is a byproduct of growing cereal grains. There's nothing grazing on those fields, so there is a much lower risk of contamination by persistent herbicides. If you want to get wheat straw, I recommend you contact your local feed store or your local farm supply store, ask them where they get the wheat straw and if it's safe, and if you have to use hay for whatever reason because you can't get straw, make sure you verify beforehand that the hay is not contaminated. My number 2 favorite mulch is shredded hardwood hardwood bark mulch. This is my favorite mulch to use in my garden. Now, whereas I love using the wheat straw around my fruit trees because it takes a while for all that wheat straw to break down, and it's great at interlocking and blocking all of those weeds long term, the reason why I love hardwood bark mulch that's shredded for my garden is because it breaks down really quickly. Now, in our garden, we are constantly turning over our soil and we're changing out plants with new ones. So for that reason, we want to use a fine grind mulch that breaks down very quickly and adds a lot of continuous organic matter to that soil. So we want a very different mulch in our garden than we do around our landscaping. And shredded hardwood bark is great for that. Now, the reason why I think that shredded hardwood bark mulch is better than other bark mulches or wood-based mulch is because many mulches out there have large pieces of wood in them. So they break down very slowly. It also makes it very difficult to sow seeds and to put little transplants in ground because the grains of mulch are larger than the plants that you're transplanting. This hardwood bark mulch has a very fine grind to it. So because of that, it's easy to apply and it's easy to scrape out of the way if you want to direct sow into the native soil, and then once the plants germinate, you can just put the mulch back in place, and since it's so fine, it doesn't have those big grains like many of the other mulches. When you buy shredded hardwood bark mulch, in my opinion, the more times it says it's shredded, the better for your garden. So there's double shredded hardwood bark, there's triple shredded hardwood bark. I think the triple would be the best because it's going to be the finest for use in your garden. So whereas your wheat straw mulches may last the better part of a year, which is great for your landscaping, these hardwood bark mulches may only last 2 to 4 months or so, depending on how finely they're shredded, which is a good thing because many of the annual vegetables that we grow only have a lifespan of something like 3 to 5 months anyway, and we want that mulch to decay as quickly as possible to add the nutrients back to the soil so we can plant a new crop. Favorite mulches 3 and 4 are cedar mulch and cypress mulch, and the reasons why I love both of these two mulches is because they are naturally rot resistant, and because of that, we use them for a completely different reason. I specifically use these naturally rot resistant mulches in areas where I don't want the mulches to break down quickly. So for that reason, I don't use them in my garden, and I don't use them mostly around my fruit trees because I actually want the mulches in those cases to break down and add organic matter into the soil and feed the microbiome and the worms. In this case, cedar mulch and cypress mulch is fantastic for my container gardens because the reasons why I mulch my containers is not to feed any earthworms or anything like that. There's basically nothing living in the potting mix. It's a mostly inert medium. The reasons why I'm mulching the containers is because I want to limit the amount that I have to water them. So it's great at preserving moisture, and also it keeps the roots cooler and it stops weeds from germinating. So for that reason, I want the mulches to last as long as possible, and cedar and cypress mulches are both great at that. The other places where I like using naturally rot-resistant mulches like cedar and cypress is in areas where nothing is particularly growing and also up against a house foundation because these two mulches are naturally termite resistant. Not termite proof, but termite resistant. So it can make a difference if you have that issue. Now, just last week I showed you how I was going to mulch this whole area with cardboard and cypress mulch because I have nothing growing in this general area around my rain barrels, and I want it to stay as weed-free as possible for as long as possible. That's why I use cypress mulch here, because it's going to last several times longer than something like hardwood bark mulch and maybe even wheat straw. And also because the mulch was going up around the foundation of my house, and I want to make sure that I use something that's naturally termite resistant. Over the years, I've been told by people that live on the west coast of the United States that they have trouble finding cedar and cypress mulches. If that is the case, you can also consider a redwood mulch. I do not personally have experience with redwood trees because they don't grow anywhere around here. However, if you have access to that, that is also a naturally rot-resistant wood. So that may fit the bill if you have that locally in your area. And the fifth mulch that I must share in this video are pine bark nuggets. I use pine bark around plants that prefer lower soil pH because pine bark is naturally acidic and lowers the pH of soil. For that reason, it is a very good situational mulch. I will show you exactly what I'm talking about. Blueberry plants, for example, like very acidic soil. They prefer a pH in the 4 to 5 range. So using pine bark nugget mulch around your blueberry plants will naturally lower the pH of your soil over time. Now, if you're like me and you have a roughly neutral native soil pH, pine bark nuggets may not be the only thing you need. In my case, because I have neutral pH, I still have to add some supplemental sulfur powder every now and again to lower the pH even more. However, since I have to apply mulch around this area anyway, it's a good idea to use a mulch that works with me instead of against me. Now, if you have naturally alkaline pH, like many growers that live in the desert southwest of the United States naturally have, pine bark nuggets may be a great all-purpose mulch in order to bring your soil pH back down to neutral or slightly below neutral, because many plants prefer neutral to ever so slightly acidic soil. And of course, another idea is to use the pine bark nuggets strategically around plants that do want slightly acidic soil. So two examples of that may be tomato plants or pepper plants. They actually like pHs that are around the 6.5 range. So if you have naturally neutral pH soil, if you mulch your tomato plants and your pepper plants with pine bark nuggets and you lower that pH just a little bit, you may wind up with better tasting tomatoes and peppers. It is said that tomatoes grown in slightly acidic soil do taste better. So that may be a little trick for you to have better tasting tomatoes. Now, it will be a little bit more annoying to work with pine bark nuggets in your garden than something like shredded hardwood bark mulch, because the pine bark nuggets are larger, so they'll be more cumbersome and the chunks are just harder to deal with. But if you're willing to deal with that, you may get better tasting food out of the deal. And that right there are my 5 favorite mulches. Now, it is important to note that none of these mulches are free in most cases. You will have to go out and buy them all. And I chose these mulches because they're generally more uniform and aesthetically pleasing, and you can place them all in the front yard of your house, and generally speaking, they will look good. However, if you're not concerned about overall looks and you want to cut costs or even get free mulch, there are some free options. Things like pine straw, chopped leaves, wood chips, grass clippings, and plant prunings. When you go to prune back your plants in the fall, you can use those prunings to mulch around all of the individual plants. So if you're not too concerned about the looks and you want to keep things as inexpensive as possible, those are some free or nearly free options for you. And the last thing that I want to discuss is why it is so important for you to winterize your landscaping, fruit trees, and garden by mulching them all during the winter. And in order to explain this, you must understand that we mulch in the fall and winter for a different reason than we do in the spring and the summer. In the spring, we usually mulch all of our plants because we are trying to add organic matter to the soil by all that mulch periodically decomposing throughout the season, retain additional moisture by preventing evaporation from the hot spring and summer sun, and suppress weeds from germinating, because weeds start germinating in the spring and they germinate vigorously all throughout the summer and into the fall. So for that reason, many gardeners do not mulch in the fall and winter because they think, well, there's very little evaporation, there's no weeds that are germinating, and decomposition grinds to a halt in most areas when it starts getting cold out. But I'm here to tell you, you still must mulch in the wintertime, and here's why. There are 3 big reasons why you must winterize your garden and your landscaping for the winter. Number 1, mulching around your fruit trees is going to prevent weed seeds from landing on the soil. Most of the weed seeds that germinate in the spring and the summer fly around in the air. They're airborne. So if you do not have a thick layer of mulch down around those trees and in your garden all fall and winter long, all of those weed seeds are going to accumulate over months and they will be ready for rapid germination. Even if you place mulch down around your trees and in your garden in the spring, those weed seeds will already be sitting on the soil, so they will germinate and pop right through the mulch. Second, mulching has a great insulating effect on your trees. It keeps the roots very warm, so it actually makes them less prone to cold damage, and it actually keeps the ground a little bit cooler in the spring when the harsh rays of the sun in the spring start hitting the ground. Sun on bare soil can actually trigger some of your trees to come out of dormancy early, which makes them more prone to late frost damage. But if you keep a thick mulch layer down, it will actually keep the soil from heating up too quickly, and it will keep your trees dormant for longer, and that is actually beneficial because your trees will wake up slightly later, so you may miss that late frost that could destroy a harvest before things even start. And finally, when it comes to your garden, you do not want your garden soil sitting bare and unprotected all throughout the winter, because even though the winter sun is weaker, all of those UV rays compounding for months on end solarizes and sterilizes the tops of your soil. So if you cover everything with a layer of mulch, you're actually protecting that garden soil and the microbiome from being destroyed by the sun. It keeps the garden microbiome alive and thriving, because even though things appear that they are dormant during the winter, they're actually not. They're just growing at a much slower rate, and the microbiome still needs things to feed off of. So you will have healthier garden soil if you keep it mulched year-round. And that right there are my 5 favorite types of mulch and why you must apply them every fall in order to winterize your plants. So everybody, I sure hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and please ring that notification bell so you're notified when we release more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products that I use in real life in my garden, they're all linked down below in my Amazon storefront. So expand the video description, click on the Amazon link, and you'll see everything I use in real life. And while you're there, check out my spread shop for custom merch if you want to support the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video. Oh, Dale, you picked a heck of a time to want to go potty now that the tropical storm is picking up. Oh man, it's getting really nasty out here, buddy. Everything is getting whipped around like crazy. I think this thing might turn into a hurricane at this rate. Oh, and of course now he doesn't want to be outside now that he hears all the wind noise. He's suddenly scared. Come on, buddy. You wanted to come out here. You got to go potty. You have to go potty, buddy. You can't just plop on me. No, 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 no. Come on, buddy. The sooner we get this over with, the sooner we can go back inside.